That's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream is up next, and I hope she has her shoes on.
You know what,
Miss Shannon?
I currently do, and we're going to have more on that Kate Steinle case because, tonight there is some breaking news, so we're going to update folks with that as well. An important one that none of us are going to let go. Laura, thank you very much.
Have a great show.
Thank you. We will. Here's what's coming up tonight.
Tonight, after days of defiance, even as top Democrats called for his resignation, John Conyers announces an early retirement.
My legacy can't be compromised or diminished in any way.
Could past ethics charges cloud Conyers' son as he now seeks his father's seat? Steyerwald is here to break it down. Plus,
it's hard to believe that the government is forcing me to choose between providing for my family and my employees and violating my relationship with God.
Justice Kennedy, who helped push the Supreme Court to broaden rights for the LGBT community, signals a Christian baker who refused to do a custom wedding cake for a same-sex couple hasn't gotten the tolerance he deserves. We'll speak with his attorney in a Fox News at Night exclusive.
Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Well, President Trump is set to fulfill a major campaign promise tomorrow, at least in part, announcing plans for a new home for the U.S. Embassy in Israel, Jerusalem. The proposal is already evoking strong reaction from some leaders in the Middle East who say this move will disrupt the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. The president's also expected to announce plans to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Correspondent Leland Vittert has more on the story. All right, Leland, how much is really going to change here?
Well, at least in the beginning, Shannon, a lot more is changing in terms of words than in terms of where the embassy is actually located. Mr. Trump is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, but he is also signing a waiver so the embassy doesn't have to move and may not move till after the 2020 election. The Israelis consider Jerusalem their capital. That's where the prime minister lives and their parliament sits. But for decades, the U.S. embassy has been 60 miles away in Tel Aviv, a nod to hopes for brokering a peace deal with the Palestinians that, among other things, would decide the final status of Jerusalem. A White House official on background says recognizing Jerusalem as the capital is just affirming a reality and went to great lengths to say this doesn't foreshadow American views of how Jerusalem should be divided up or any of the other negotiating points. The Palestinians, well, they want Jerusalem as their capital as well. But they, along with their Arab allies, aren't happy. Video tonight out of Bethlehem, where they are already burning pictures of President Trump in the West Bank. And Palestinian leaders have called for what they call 3 days of rage. The U.S. consulate in Jerusalem, noteworthy, not the embassy still in Tel Aviv, issued a warning on Twitter, complete with emojis, saying U.S. government employees and family members aren't allowed to travel to Jerusalem's Old City or West Bank, and advising all U.S. citizens to take these restrictions into consideration for their own plans. Thousands of American citizens live in the West Bank on Jewish settlements, which are often targeted by Palestinian violence. The Israeli security forces are preparing for protests, and Shannon, we're told from the Pentagon that around the Middle East, Marine Corps anti-terrorism teams have already deployed to bolster security at other U.S. embassies.
All right, Leland, so do we know any timetable for when an embassy would actually open in Jerusalem?
And that is the big question tonight. White House officials say it could take 3 or 4 years to locate, design, fund, and build a new U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. Jerusalem city officials, though, are quoted as saying it could quite literally open tomorrow. Just change the name on the massive new U.S. facility. A little ground truth. This was us in May in Jerusalem at that new sprawling U.S. consulate annex. That annex was reportedly built to house a new U.S. embassy sometime in the future. Certainly looked like that when I visited. Massive, well protected. The security teams there confronted us when we were hundreds of yards away filming. But when pressed why the State Department wouldn't just change the plaque on the door, making it the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, the White House demurred some vague security and facility concerns, which then begs a big question, whether the consulate facilities in Jerusalem aren't safe, or if the White House wanted to make an announcement right now without really having to change any facts on the ground. Perhaps, Shannon, a question Vice President Mike Pence will face when he visits Israel less than 2 weeks from right now.
All right, it's a question we are asking tonight as well. Leland Vittert, thank you very much. Fox News foreign policy analyst Kyron Skinner is here. She advised President Trump during the transition and tonight was on a call with the White House about this very topic. She's a professor of international relations at Carnegie Mellon and a research fellow at the Hoover Institution. Great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about some of what Leland had to say there. We will have the speech from the president 1 o'clock tomorrow. Apparently, we're going to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital, but the embassy's not going to get there right away. We're hearing some putting on the brakes a little bit from the White House about that move actually happening. Why?
Well, it's actually not putting on the brakes. There's some realities about moving an embassy. It takes many, many years to build embassies, to find the right spot, to build the security apparatus. So that's part of it. And you know, it was in 1995 that Congress passed in a overwhelmingly bipartisan way the Jerusalem Embassy Act, saying that this should in fact occur, moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But nothing really has been done until President Trump decided to take action. He campaigned on this a year ago, talking very strongly about the need to move our embassy. And it's not so much a campaign promise, but part of his overall foreign policy. It, to me, is an application of what he's called principled realism. He's recognizing the fact that Jerusalem is the headquarters for the Israeli government. The legislature is there. The Supreme Court is there. Most of the administrative part of the state is there. And he's saying, I'm recognizing this without making a broader determination about sovereignty in juridical issues, which will have to happen between the Israelis and Palestinians. I think he's actually trying to provide an assist to them by saying the sovereignty issues are your own. We're making a determination that's in the interest of the United States.
Okay, so as Leland showed the footage there of the big consulate annex that he was observing in May, and there are folks there on the ground who are also saying that facility is ready for this, and they wonder why there's a stall. I want to read a little bit of an article in Haaretz today saying city planning officials shrugged that there's no need to build anything new to house the embassy in the Israeli capital. The Americans built a big new consulate in the Jerusalem neighborhood of Arnona, which had been planned in advance to be converted into the actual embassy one day. All the Americans need to do is change the sign on the door, they say.
I think that's a little naive. I think a consulate is not an embassy, and there are different facilities in embassies that don't necessarily exist in consulates, but also this may be part of a larger rethinking about where the U.S. physically wants to be in Jerusalem. And the consulate was prepared before this announcement. Clearly, it's been there. So I think I would put that aside. That, to me, is not the biggest issue we're facing. It's really to make sure that this move is consistent with the broader Middle East strategy of the president.
Let me get you to respond to one of the critics. This is a spokesman for the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas about how they feel about these announcements.
This is against the international law, and this will be unacceptable from our side. If this happens, it would complicate things. It would put an obstacle to the peace process. Maybe it will be the end of the peace process.
And quickly there he says it might be the end of the peace process.
Yes, but you know, also the president has talked with him and a number of leaders in the Arab world in this year and even in the last 24 hours. You would expect to hear that publicly, but very few are saying that the United States will not be the indispensable outside broker in the Middle East peace process. And so I think that's what's key. The United States is central to what will happen as an outside facilitator for Middle East peace. It has to act in its own interests, but the parties understand that the United States brings a kind of moral and strategic clarity that no other nation can provide.
And it sounds like President Trump has invited Mahmoud Abbas here to Washington as well, so we'll watch that closely. A professor, among many other things. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right, this is a Fox News alert. Our sister station, Sky News, is reporting that security forces in England have foiled a terror plot to assassinate British Prime Minister Theresa May. 2 men have been arrested. They're due to appear in court tomorrow morning. Sky says the suspected terrorist allegedly planned to attack the Prime Minister's residence at 10 Downing Street with some sort of improvised explosive device. And back here at home, the most senior member of the House will not be returning to Capitol Hill. Michigan Democratic Congressman John Conyers announced his resignation today, or what he's calling a retirement, amid accusations of sexual harassment by at least 6 women. Ed Henry's here tonight with details, including word of another Conyers accuser surfacing. Hi, Ed.
That's right, Shannon. New tonight, we're learning a 4th accuser was about to go public against John Conyers, so he may have been trying to get ahead of more trouble, as a Democrat is one of the first politicians to fall in the sexual harassment scandals that have taken out powerful men in various industries. The 88-year-old Conyers was the dean of the House after several decades in office. He was already dealing with allegations of harassment that he has denied from at least 3 women. Breaking tonight, attorney Lisa Bloom revealed she has an affidavit from another woman, Dolores Lyons, who claims she was victimized by the congressman while serving as a volunteer for him in the 2011 to 2012 timeframe. Bloom tweeting out, quote, "Here's another woman stepping forward to document her sexual harassment claims against John Conyers, who still denies sexually harassing anyone. Conyers said he wasn't getting due process, but he knew our witnesses were prepared to testify before the Ethics Committee." An attorney for Conyers insists the woman came into Conyers' office and flirted with him and is denying the claim against the congressman, who announced his exit from a hospital where he's being treated for a stress-related illness. Listen to what he said.
I am retiring today, and I want everyone to know how much I appreciate the support, the incredible, undiminished support I've received across the years.
Yet it appears the drama is not completely over. The congressman endorsed his son, John Conyers III, to replace him, but a grandnephew of the congressman, State Senator Ian Conyers, insists he's running as well. Remember, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi got into hot water for initially calling Conyers an icon and appearing to doubt the accounts of some of his accusers. Under political pressure, she reversed course and called on him to resign. Tonight, Pelosi is praising what she calls the, quote, brave women who came forward, and says she's praying for the congressman and his family. Shannon.
All right, Ed Henry, thank you very much. Well, former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon is campaigning with Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore in Alabama tonight. President Trump officially endorsed Moore yesterday, and the Republican National Committee is backing him again, sending funding back into that race. Prominent Republicans are tempering their initial calls for Moore to drop out of the race after several accusations of sexual misconduct have surfaced. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell now says Alabama voters should decide Moore's fate. Well, during a luncheon with GOP senators, President Trump touted Republican Party unity, all while sitting right next to Arizona Senator Jeff Flake. If you'll remember, he's openly criticized the president and urged his colleagues against complicity. Now, despite that, this was the president's take today.
We're all on the same page. There's a great spirit in the Republican Party like I've never seen before, like a lot of people have said they've never seen before. They've never seen anything like this, the unity. So I think a lot of very good things are going to happen. It's going to happen very fast.
Here to react, Fox News politics editor Chris Steyerwalt. Okay, good to have you with us. You're already chuckling. But after this comment about unity, and apparently there was some discussion of Roy Moore during this conversation, and my understanding is that Senator Flake said, I didn't engage with the president. I think he's wrong about that. But then we got a tweet that we want to show everyone this afternoon from Senator Flake. It's a check that appears to be written from him to Doug Jones, Roy Moore's opponent, a pretty liberal Democrat down there in Alabama. He says in the subject line for this check, country over party. So...
Lot to unpack there, Counselor.
That feels like there's a little trolling going on there.
Got a lot to unpack there. Well, first of all, Doug Jones is only a liberal Democrat by the standards of Alabama. In most of the country, he would be a Republican.
Well, yeah. You know, those kinds of things.
The Republicans are definitely capitalizing on the abortion issue and his stance as pro-choice, which, of course, the Democrats won't let you be a Democrat unless you're pro-choice, just like the Republicans.
Price of admission.
It's just as pro-life substantially as for Republicans. But I love the look on Jeff Flake's face.
I know, when the president's talking.
He looked like they were serving like a possum stew that he was going to have to try to choke down. But, you know, look, Flake, has been accused of peacocking a little bit on this, that he's out and claiming credit for doing this. And Ben Sass, his colleague from Nebraska, basically said this: you don't have to choose. It's not necessary to choose between someone credibly accused of abusing his position as a prosecuting attorney to try to pick up young teenagers and a person who supports abortion, elective abortion. And what Sass's message to Flake was, you don't have to pick between those two things. You can write somebody in or you can not vote. If the system fails you in that way, it's not incumbent on you to make a choice. And what's happening right now in Alabama is the Republicans very much are saying it doesn't matter whether he did it. It doesn't matter whether you like him. It doesn't matter any of these things. You just have to stick with your team and you have to vote for Roy Moore, even though everybody increasingly sees more and more evidence around Moore and no real credible denials coming from it.
Well, you know, he denies everything.
Well, now he's actually changed his denial.
I mean, some of these people he says he did know, but he denies doing anything wrong.
No, now he's backed off that. Now he says he never knew any of them. Now it's a totally blanket, abject denial.
Okay, well then that's a denial.
That's a super denial.
That's a super denial. Okay. Now, somebody who also is denying a lot of stuff, but is no longer coming back to Capitol Hill is Representative John Conyers. He said that he's not resigning. He's announcing his retirement effective today. So I guess if you retire in the middle of your term, it's not a resignation.
Shh. I mean, Lordy day. Look, the amount of arrogance, the amount of hubris that is on display in American politics has always been, and I'm not going to say that it hasn't been.
No, there's plenty of it up there on the Hill.
But the stench of the hubris and the arrogance and the ego around these people, and whether it's Roy Moore down in Alabama or whether it is John Conyers, who will not say I'm quitting in the stench of failure.
I'm retiring.
I'm having a surprise retirement. It's a surprise retirement.
Effective today.
Effective right now. And to do that, and then that this person leaving after damaging the reputation of his party, damaging the institution in which he claims to hold in great reverence, and damaging all of these things, that this person, in absolute disgrace, would dare to instruct the constituents who he failed. He failed these people, that he would have the temerity to then instruct them to keep a dynasty going in his seat by putting his 27-year-old son in it. It is beyond. It goes, the amount of arrogance, the amount of hubris that we're seeing, whether it's in Alabama or whether we're seeing in Detroit, we've lost the tether here, folks.
Well, okay, but he has a great nephew who is currently a state lawmaker, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Who also has already said he wants to run for the seat. So Christmas is going to be a little awkward at the Conyers household, is all I'm saying.
It should tell us a little something about the way Detroit politics are working. If, in fact, a seat in the House is treated as a heritable sinecure, that this is a noble title, a position that should be held by one family and one family only, that is un-American. It's not cool.
Okay, also not cool that we're out of time, but I have to ask you quickly, there are Republicans facing charges on the Hill. There are other Democrats on both sides, the House and the Senate. So did those folks go anywhere, or do you think they hang on?
Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi can't agree on how to keep the government open, but I bet they can find a way to agree to stop the pain and keep these revelations from coming and clamp down on making sure that these things don't come out, because they got a lot of dirty dogs that they want to keep in the pound.
Oh, dirty dogs they want to keep in the pound. All right, I'm gonna tweet that a little bit later. Chris, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay, a week after he was cleared of state charges of murder and involuntary manslaughter, illegal immigrant Jose Inez Garcia Zarate is facing new charges, this time brought by the feds. He was indicted today on both gun and immigration violations. Last week, you'll remember, jury found Garcia Zarate not guilty in the shooting death of 32-year-old Kate Steinle. He admits shooting her. We're going to have a whole lot more on that unfolding story later on in the show, including a very spirited debate, I predict. So stick around for that. And we're going to break down the latest developments in the unfolding special counsel controversy. Yet more indications tonight of potential anti-Trump bias by key investigators on the team. And we're going to tell you about the very hot bench inside the Supreme Court, where the justices heard arguments in a landmark case pitting a gay couple against a Christian cake baker. What potential swing Justice Anthony Kennedy had to say. All right now. An email obtained by government watchdog group Judicial Watch shows that a key member of special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe team, Andrew Weissman, praised outgoing acting Attorney General Sally Yates after she defied President Trump. Yates refused to defend the president's controversial travel ban, prompting Weissman to send Yates an email saying, quote, I am so proud. Well, special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia has at a price tag of $6.7 million so far. That's according to a financial report released by Mueller's office today. Texts from one of Mueller's top investigators, FBI agent Peter Strzok, showed enough bias against President Trump to get him kicked off the case. And those texts apparently are going to be turned over to congressional investigators. That's just one of the developments that prompted the Wall Street Journal editorial board to question whether Mueller is too conflicted to properly investigate the Russia case comprehensively. The Journal writing, quote, while there's no evidence so far of Trump-Russia collusion, House investigators have turned up enough material to suggest that anti-Trump motives may have driven Mr. Comey's FBI investigation. All of this reinforces our doubts about Mr. Mueller's ability to conduct a fair and credible probe of the FBI's considerable part in the Russia-Trump drama. With us to discuss now, former press secretary for George W. Bush and Fox News contributor Ari Fleischer, and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree. Great to see you both tonight.
Good evening.
Okay, so we're learning more about two members. One, I understand, is still part of the Mueller team. Another one was reassigned elsewhere. But it's pretty interesting what's been revealed so far. And the White House seems a little bit concerned, or at least is pointing the fingers, Ari, that this is evidence that this thing may not be fair. What do you think?
Well, it's really troubling me, Shannon, and I say that as somebody who is regularly and continues to defend Bob Mueller, the individual, because I know him, I serve with him, I find him to be a Boy Scout, a man of the utmost integrity who only wants to do the right thing. But he has a problem, and the FBI under Chris Wray now has a problem. America can never doubt the integrity of the FBI, but now we have legitimate reasons to do so. The fact that an FBI agent in charge, one of the people in charge of the Hillary investigation, could be so biased, could be so partisan, and he also is the one who interviewed Cheryl Mills and Huma Abedin, and they gave him information that was contradicted by their emails, and nothing happened to them. You really do have to scratch your head and wonder what's going on below the Mueller level. And it is not healthy for the country if legitimate questions are raised and are not answered. The FBI and Bob Mueller need to assure the American people that this is being done with integrity.
Yeah, and Tom, the piece from the Wall Street Journal editorial board is called Mueller's credibility problem. I want to read a little bit more of that and get your reaction. It says Donald Trump is his own worst enemy, as his many ill-advised tweets on the weekend about Michael Flynn, the FBI, and Robert Mueller's Russia probe demonstrate. But that doesn't mean that Mr. Mueller and the Federal Bureau of Investigation deserve a pass about their motives and methods, as this new information raises troubling questions. Your reaction?
Yeah, look, my reaction is the president is entitled to a fair, nonpartisan investigation. And the fact is DOJ and the FBI really should be the gold standard in terms of neutrality and impartiality. And when you see things like this, and it's not just one incident, but as you mentioned, it's been several incidents now in a row where people involved in the investigation clearly have very strong personal feelings about President Trump. And the fact is right or wrong, it is going to cast a shadow over how this investigation is carried out, any charges or prosecutions that may ultimately result, because even if they're supported by evidence, I think the American people are going to look at that and say, was this a decision driven by legitimate law enforcement concerns, or is it someone just exercising their partisan political preferences?
And Ari, you know, we did have some tweets from the president over the weekend pointing to some of these things, saying, like, now it's all starting to make sense. I mean, how does the White House manage these revelations? Because, you know, there's one side that you think if you let Mueller work through his investigation and it exonerates the president, or doesn't ever prove that there's any collusion or anything criminal in nature, he wins by not trying to beat up Mueller too much. But on the other hand, you know he's not going to be able to resist pointing to things like this, saying he isn't getting a fair shake.
No, the president has never resisted that. But my advice to him, and I think it's advice that will not be heeded, is don't go front and center after the FBI. The president of the United States should not do that. His campaign, his people are being subject to this investigation, and it's unseemly for the president of the United States to weigh in. It's partly what got him in trouble when he fired Comey. So the president is better served by staying out and waiting for that exoneration to take place. I've seen no evidence of collusion. I'm sure it would have leaked by now if it existed. So I suspect at the end of the day, the president will be free and clear. But who's not free and clear is the reputation of the FBI. And that must be pure. And that's why I do find this to be so troubling. And you know, don't forget too, Shannon, that Mueller has several people working for him who are Democratic donors. he should have been more careful in who he hired. All these things now, the anti-Trump texts, pro-Hillary support from the FBI agent, the Andrew Weissman information that you just described earlier in the broadcast, and the fact that many of several people who work for Mueller are Democratic contributors, none of it serves the image of justice being blind.
Tom, quick final word to you.
Well, I think the solution here, Shannon, is really, number one, transparency. And that if there are these texts out there, I think it's good that DOJ is going to turn them over to Congress. I think it's good that we're finding out who these investigators are, because at the end of the day, the American people are going to judge the outcome of this investigation depending on whether they have faith in the investigators and the evidence, if any, that they uncover. And I think Mueller needs to take affirmative, hard steps right now to ensure the independence and the integrity of his team and his investigation.
All right, Tom Dupree, Ari Fleischer, great to have you both with us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, new developments tonight in the case of the illegal immigrant found not guilty after he admitted he shot and killed a 32-year-old San Francisco woman. Trace Gallagher has the latest move by the federal government in the Kate Steinle case next. Plus, we'll head straight to the front lines as firefighters attack a Southern California blaze. Adam Housley is there with a preview. Good evening, Adam.
Yeah, Shannon, the fires have are still burning down homes here in Southern California. The winds have died down a bit in the last few minutes, but they're expected to come back by Thursday and come back hard. I'm Adam Housley. We'll have those details coming up.
California is facing yet another round of wildfires. A state of emergency has been declared in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. Officials there are urging tens of thousands of residents near the flames to leave their homes. We will have more on that story coming up, but right now, just days after a San Francisco jury found him not guilty of murdering 32-year-old Kate Steinle, the illegal immigrant who admitted that he shot her is now facing new charges. They're federal this time. Trace Gallagher is live in our Los Angeles bureau to tell us more. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. As soon as Jose Garcia Zarate was acquitted of killing Kate Steinle, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said the federal government would get involved. And sure enough, today, a federal grand jury indicted Garcia Zarate for being a felon in possession of a firearm and for being an illegal immigrant in possession of a firearm. If convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison before potentially being deported for a sixth time. For now, Garcia Zarate remains in state custody. His sentencing is next week, and because he will likely get time served, legal experts say he'll be immediately turned over to the federal government. And today, while Zarate was being indicted by a federal grand jury, San Francisco DA George Gascon gave a news conference. The DA said the jury's acquittal of Garcia Zarate was, quote, hard to receive, but went on to say he respects the decision and then lashed out at conservative pundits and President Trump for turning Zarate into a political football. Listen.
I think it's important for the President of the United States to remember that this is a nation of laws. And part of being a nation of laws is that we respect the legal process, even when the outcome is one that we may be unhappy with. We need to use a little bit of discipline and not allow simply somebody, a madman that is tweeting, dictate everything else that we do.
The DA also said he stands for what his city stands for, meaning its sanctuary city policy, which we now know is the reason Jose Garcia Zarate came to San Francisco in the first place. He told investigators the city's liberal laws made it easier for immigrants without documents to fly under the radar. After Kate Steinle was shot and killed in July of 2015, the case became national news after the revelation that because of sanctuary city policies, Garcia Zarate had been released from jail in San Francisco instead of being turned over to immigration agents for deportation. The defendant's immigration history was not allowed during the trial. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher with the latest. Thank you very much. All right, back to those wildfires in California. Another round of them there. A state of emergency has been declared in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. These are some live pictures looking out here. Officials there are urging tens of thousands of residents near those areas of those flames to leave their homes.
Firefighters have already given up on the homes behind me here. You can see the conditions across Southern California are vicious. Winds blowing in excess of 70 miles an hour in some areas. This home here they gave up on. Look at the flames come up there. The front half of this three-story home has already collapsed down in front of it. Homes on either side so far have been spared, but it seems like firefighters have pretty much given up on this entire street. So if those flames spread to the home next door, as you can see to the left,
And that was some of Adam Housley's coverage today. He's actually there live tonight. So let's check in with him with the latest, because that's what he was seeing during the day. Still burning there tonight. Adam, fill us in.
Yeah, Shannon, you know, that video you saw there was from a couple of hours ago. The wind's really blowing across the mountains here in Ventura County and in the city of Ventura, which is a large metropolitan area about an hour north of Los Angeles. Behind me, this neighborhood really had no chance. This is actually 2 hillsides over from where that video was shot earlier today. You can see this house was burned down. In fact, several hundred homes burned down in this area. They don't have the exact number yet at this hour. If we want to go back to that video, it can show you the winds and how brutal they are when they kick up. Right now, they've died down a bit, but they're expected to come back. Take a listen again of what it's like out here when these winds roar through these canyons. Firefighters have already given up on the homes behind me here. You can see the conditions across Southern California are vicious. Winds blowing in excess of 75 miles an hour in some areas. This home here they gave up on. Look at the flames come up there. The front half of this three-story home has already collapsed down in front of it. Homes on either side so far have been spared, but it seems like firefighters have pretty much given up on this entire street. So if those flames spread to the home next door, as you can see to the left, it too will go up. But right now it's pretty much just search and rescue, doing what they can to save what they can. But with these winds, it's almost impossible. The main front of this fire is now burning out into the wildlands towards Ojai, another obviously very popular, really tourist destination, smaller town here in Southern California. But the problem still is this. You see these hot areas like this that are burning in these neighborhoods that have burned down, whether they're gas lines or in this case, gas lines and fuel that hadn't yet burned. You can even see the smoke now. Even in the last 2 minutes talking to you, Shannon, the smoke is the wind's picked up. You can see the smoke now blowing across. You can see the embers coming up. It's those embers that can blow as far as a mile away. And there are a number of homes that are still standing in this neighborhood, thankfully, that survived the fire thus far. But we watched 4 different homes burn down with fire crews in front of them today, and there was nothing they can do when those winds blow and those embers get into the attic. Shannon?
Yeah, just watching those powerful images, you can't say it better. And I know the tough conditions are coming. So, Adam, please be careful and keep us updated.
Will do. All
right. Dozens of protesters arrested at lawmakers' offices in Arizona and California as so-called dreamers pressure lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to shut down the government if their demands aren't met. And a heated day of arguments in the landmark Supreme Court case over a baker who refused to make a custom wedding cake for a gay couple. You're going to hear from both sides, and stick around for the Fox News exclusive, one of the attorneys who argued that case today.
That is not freedom. That is not tolerance.
Religious freedom or discrimination. That's the decision before the 9 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. Today they heard arguments in the case of a Christian baker who declined to make a custom wedding cake for a gay couple. They say they were left humiliated by that experience. Well, Kristen Wagner, Senior Vice President at Alliance Defending Freedom, argued on behalf of the baker, Jack Phillips, today and joins us now to talk about it. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
By the way, we want to let folks know we did invite the other parties to the case, the other side, and they did not choose to come. Charlie Craig and Dave Mullins, the couple, as well as their attorney. They are more than welcome to join us anytime, but we're glad that you're here today. It was a very hot bench. Yes. And for folks who haven't argued a case or don't know what that means, I mean, you couldn't get an answer out. Many of the attorneys, there were 4 of you today, could not get the answers out before that next question was on top of you. What did you make of where the case went today?
Well, I think the judges asked very insightful questions, hard questions for both sides, and are really carefully looking at the implications of forcing people to express messages that would violate their religious convictions and that clearly concern the justices.
Well, the whole argument is that Jack Phillips, as a baker, he is an artist as he creates these cakes. My understanding is that he was happy for the couple to buy pre-made items there, but he didn't want to engage in something that he'd have to craft it with his artistic skills. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who gave you a bit of a hard time today, said this. She said, there are sandwich artists now. There are people who create beauty in what they make, but we still don't call that expressive and entitled to First Amendment protection. So how is making a cake entitled to First Amendment protection?
It's not that every cake is entitled to First Amendment, but a wedding cake is inherently expressive, and Jack Phillips's cakes are inherently expressive in the wedding context. They express a message that the union is a marriage and that it's to be celebrated. And for nearly 25 years, he's always ensured that the cakes that he creates express messages that are consistent with his conscience. And this is just one of many cakes that he couldn't design, most of which never had anything to do with sexual orientation, but simply are just what's consistent with what he believes and who he is.
Okay, I want to play a little bit from Senator Tammy Duckworth. She's one of the many lawmakers we saw out there at the court today. Here's what she said about how she views this case.
I just wanted to come out to make one thing very clear. Our civil rights should not be up for debate. Every American deserves equal protection under the law.
So how do you answer those who say that if you put out a shingle for business, you shouldn't be able to turn anyone away, regardless of the circumstances? If you're in the stream of commerce, you don't get to pick and choose who you turn away.
You don't lose your constitutional rights when you go into business. That's how I'd respond. And the theory that the ACLU and the government put forward today is downright frightening. The suggestion that a filmmaker or an oil painter or a graphic designer can be forced to violate their conscience, that a Democratic speechwriter could be forced to have to write for a Republican, or that an atheist soloist would have to perform at an Easter worship service, these are all the implications of this law if the government wins this case. It's unprecedented that the court would consider and actually force people to voice messages that violate the core of who they are.
I want to quickly touch on Justice Kennedy because he's often the swing vote in critical cases, and he's been very open and has written opinions furthering the rights of the LGBT community. So everybody's watching him today. He was hard on both sides, as you know, but he wound up saying this. He said, tolerance is essential in a free society, and tolerance is most meaningful when it's mutual. It seems to me that the state in its position here has been neither tolerant nor respectful of Mr. Phillips' religious beliefs. Did that give you a glimmer of hope that you guys might be successful?
Absolutely. I mean, the idea that the commission that decided Mr. Phillips's fate, that literally could take his livelihood from him, told him and compared his religious beliefs to perpetrators of the Holocaust and slave owners, that's egregious. And then they actually took action on that bias, and he's lost the work he loves and 40% of his income. He's been demeaned, and his beliefs have been compared to racists. That isn't tolerant. That's intolerance.
All right. Well, we'll wait for a decision. It's due by June. Thank you very much for coming in today, Kristen.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right. Could a dispute over the so-called Dreamers lead to a government shutdown at the end of this week? We'll see if Democrats and President Trump are ready to make a deal before the money runs out.
We showed the president no games. This is serious stuff. We think he learned, and he invited us back this week.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say they're looking to avoid a government shutdown, with funding for the federal government set to run out on Friday. Democrats say, though, they plan to leverage this whole issue to get legislation passed to protect the so-called Dreamers, people brought here illegally at a young age, like the ones you see that are protesting outside of Senator John McCain's Arizona office today, or yesterday. So will Republicans and President Trump call their bluff? And who gets blamed if the government does shut down? Let's talk about it with radio show hosts Richard Fowler and Mary Walter here. Richard's also a Fox News contributor. Good to see both of you today.
Be here.
Okay, so Mary, I'll start with you. They are doing these sit-ins across the country. They say, listen, they don't want the funding to get done by the end of the year, and they're going to call out Democrats and Republicans to make sure they get their way.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I think really angers Americans is, you know, here you are demonstrating and telling us how we have to run our country. That's not a way to make people sympathetic to your cause at all. A lot of people feel you have no right to be demanding anything from this country whatsoever. And I think people would like to see them be grateful and appreciative for what they have gotten so far, as opposed to demanding. So I don't know if this really helps their cause.
Well, this is what Senator Cornyn had to say about it, a Republican out of Texas.
This simply does not advance the interests of these DACA recipients to try to force us into a shutdown narrative.
All right, so what do you make of it, Richard? Is this tactic going to work?
We'll have to see. I mean, Ted Cruz is the king of government shutdowns. Remember, he shut the government down last time.
That's what we're talking about.
For no reason in particular.
We're talking about the one that's going to happen this week. Maybe.
Fair. But here's the thing. I actually think the government won't get shut down. For the first time in a long time, 35 House Republicans have come out and said, well, 34 and one non-voting delegate have come out and said, we support DACA, we support the Dreamers. The president seems to want to support the Dreamers. We know now it's on the rest of the Republican Party to say these individuals came to this country at no fault of their own. They contribute to our society immensely. Most of them, you either have to be working, serving in our military, or in a college or university, and they are benefiting Americans, and therefore they should have the right to stay here, and we should pass this DREAM Act immediately. Remember, this was a law written by George W. Bush, and the fact that we're still debating it in 2017, when George W. Bush was president almost a decade ago,
But now what we're
is
talking
insane.
about is DACA, which was done by executive order, which a lot of people think that President Obama said he couldn't do, and then he did. But you referenced this letter from the House GOP. 35 different members said this: DACA recipients, young people brought to America through no fault of their own, are contributing members of our communities and our economy. Reaching across the aisle to protect DACA recipients before the holidays is the right thing to do. Mary.
Well, this is another thing that people hate about the swamp is that they sit here and they say that we're going to put this on another bill. We're going to put this on the spending bill. And then instead of having a clean spending bill and a clean DACA bill so we can know how our representatives are voting, they mash it together so we don't know. And this is what people hate about the swamp, the lack of transparency. I want to know how my representative is voting on DACA, on immigration, aside from the spending bill.
That's nothing new.
That doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right.
Republicans and Democrats have been doing this for decades. So
But that doesn't make it right.
But let's not punish the 700,000 DACA recipients because politicians in Washington can't get their act
This
together.
is the only crime we reward people for committing.
All right, we got to leave it. We got to leave it there. Coming here illegally is a crime. We got to leave it there. You are not committing crimes, the two of you. We hope you'll come back.
Good to see you, Shannon.
Good to see you. Richard and Mary, thank you. Most watched, most trusted, and tonight most grateful that you spent the evening with us on Fox News at Night. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.